Hey guys, Hodge, Seven of Truth here. Hope you're all doing well. Interesting times we always seem to find ourselves in. The last release I did was called the Multidimensional Method to the 3D Madness. And in that recording I said a lot which I want to share and things like that, many components which I want to offer. But I thought I'd actually continue with that. I think it's a really interesting theme to expand greatly on, and I think I can help a lot of people to actually perceive what's going on, because the purpose of speaking about the multidimensional method to the 3D madness, I feel when you see the higher levels, and you can sort of see the patterns going on, what happens in the 3D makes a lot more sense. Such things as the incarnation war. And I absolutely hold a lot of the teachings I learned from Andrew as my core still. It doesn't matter what happened. They have been foundational to me, and I will expand upon them with them as assumptions. Because in my own world I discern them and see the pattern relative to them, such as, if there's a multidimensional oversoul that has many thousands, if not millions, of components. For instance, you see the politicians that rotate through in their different skin suits, but their behaviour is continuing of what went on before. Another thing about that which is really interesting is the whole race thing, okay? So when you're dealing with a soul level, the skin suit and judging people based on that, it's pretty ludicrous, alright? So you've got to see that sort of pattern that's played out as a beneficial of sort of the madness in the 3D, right? If you're seeing and dealing with people on the soul level, you see through their skin suit. It is an interesting expression to have an existence in, but it's distraction on many levels, because a lot of people go into judgment based on race and sexuality and all that sort of thing, when if you purely tune into the soul, the unique experience of the individual in the 3D is fascinating, but you can operate on the higher level and overcome all the 3D ups and downs and just sail through and see the purpose of it all. Alright? So I'll bring in the race thing that's been going on, say, in the US, and a bit later in this video, which I want to get into, basically about pattern recognition, which is a very important component to be able to have as a default sort of program running in the background with all the data that you collect, because it just adds to the depth of what you see and what you perceive. And so why I'm saying that is, to do, say, the Galactic Special Forces level work, have to have a very foundational understanding of the reality. If you don't, you're guessing and you don't know what impact you might have and stuff like that. So yeah, just take on those things and see it. They're individual sort of muscles to master and work on the perception and reality understanding of things, because we're here, we're on our own. We have guides and guardians and our off-world allies and stuff, but we're the ones that are here that have to do the work. Getting here in the soul level on the 3D, in the physical body, is the key. Alright? So then it comes, what are you going to do? Are you going to step up? Are you going to be passive and let everyone else do it, or wait for someone else? Or are you going to accept the responsibility of the awareness you've gained? And what happens if you have that as a foundation rather than a ceiling? What other potentials are in there for you? That's why I deal with infinite potential healing. I love those linguistic words together. Could have called it anything but infinite potential. Because what we do is we find that we might think we have that, but then we hit ceilings constantly, and it's related to traumas and stuff like that, or beliefs or whatever. You don't really have to put ceilings on yourself. You can make them the next level of your foundation to what is your potential. So the pattern recognition, and I'm going to share some of the components and teachings and teachers, in particularly a guy called Dr. Weston Price, who I feel in me. I call him the Nikola Tesla of nutrition, because for me, over about 5 or 6 year, maybe 7 year period, I developed my own nutrition to have my physical skin suit nourished. And it's very important, because if you understand the say, for instance, if you go into fear and you release your adrenals, there's an energetic cost, let alone the nutritional cost of that. So for me, the foundation is to get on top of the 3D, the physical body, skin suit, so I can have a perception potential, intuitive potential, whatever. For me, the skin suit has many technologies in it. Might be unique, like I said, the race and different cultures and regions where the skin suits might come from have different technologies. But the overall fundamental is, I see in the reality, most people working on 30 or 40% of their life force in their body. Okay, so when they're in lack, higher level functions aren't really there, because the body's basically battling for nutrition to survive in the reality. And so when people are, like say for you, you might perceive stuff and it seems obvious, and you don't understand why other people can't. You have to understand, to change a perspective on a component that we subconsciously assume, to actually integrate a change into your life based on all the ripples that change of perception might have relative to a core component, such as talking about incarnation level of things. A lot of people don't have the life force in their body to actually change. Hey again, just had a bit of an interruption for a little while, some noise and stuff going on in the area. So what I was saying was related to the life force cost of changing a perspective. Many of you that probably follow me and listen to what I've said and shared and stuff, when you gain new data that expands what you previously thought, such as when you make mistakes and stuff, and the way I see a mistake is not the way society sees it. I see a mistake as a confirmation of a greater level of awareness than you presently had. Because when you make a mistake, what you realize is what you thought you knew is expanded by that bit more. And you get a confirmation of the level where you are, realizing that there's more that you could know. So it's an opportunity to realize in real time that you have a greater potential. Society demonizes mistakes and stuff, and everyone's fear of failure and blah blah blah. But I did IT engineering, and IT engineering was trial and error. There's such things as brute force attacks in hacking, which is basically trying thousands and thousands of passwords till you get the right combination. Thomas Edison, famous inventor that battled with Tesla, I don't remember the quote off the top of my head, but the method to going around and creating the light bulb took him 10,000 tries, you know? So failure is a greater level of understanding. That's the way I see it. So, yeah, so a lot of people fear failure, so they don't try. So they stay where they are because they're worried about the perception of what others think about, making a mistake. Whereas if you internalize it, you realize, wow, I got the calibration off. If I shift based on the new data, I expand. You can see ripples going through you and stuff like that of how So I have this thing called the principles of existence that I created back in 2014 when I was the first 4 months of, before the most of the Galactic Special Forces stuff. I wrote something I call the principles of my existence, and the very first thing I have is, how am I wrong in this moment? Because when you look at society and stuff, wars and history and all that sort of thing, you might get these beings that are so stagnant and locked into what they think they know, and a lot of the arguments and wars are created by the fear of being wrong and the inability to accept that you might be wrong. Because when the perception that you might have if you concede that you might be wrong is that someone has a status above you because they were right. And there's a great sort of subtle weakness in accepting that you're wrong, when in actual fact conceding is actually a very powerful space to be. If you watch martial art films and stuff like that, the guy that will kick ass the most, he's the least willing to fight. He concedes, he will let everyone else win, and he'll fight at the very, very last minute to defend himself and stuff. You watch TV shows like Kung Fu, you know, it's the greatest power is conceding what you knew, because you have to actually be spiritually and perception-wise selfish to want the greatest perception you can have. So if you have the courage to accept that you might be wrong, don't worry about what others think. Just realize that you've got an expansion potential right in your face. You know, when we don't often make a lot of mistakes, but now and again they might be big ones and they have ramifications on our lives and stuff like that. And I've said my history and all that, part of it anyway. But what you gain is awareness. I'm willing to concede, alright? So enjoy being wrong. When you get wrong, you get more awareness and your expansion will go, alright? What I was talking about before the interruption was the majority of people are actually really low on energy. They're basically in energetic deficiency, and illnesses and diseases, in my perspective, on one level, are a byproduct of the least worst option coming up, alright? So if people don't have enough life force and nourishment to actually maintain their body, and you know, when shows with Andrew talk about entities that harvest energy and all that sort of stuff, that see the media put out fear and all that stuff, people release their adrenals and stuff, and there's entities on the unseen that are out collecting it, just like in the movie The Matrix. You know, these entities were collecting the energy off the harvesting beings, alright? But maybe just see that as the unseen. So what I'm saying is, the majority of people in survival mode, they don't actually have the will force and the life force to actually instigate proactive change in their awareness, because there's all these ripples that you have to calibrate. So if, for instance, a big thing for me was actually reading the book Danny Brinkley, Saved by the Light, where he talked about he had an out-of-body experience based on a near-death experience, and he had to review himself from that. He saw all the consequence of his actions in the life review, right? And when he came back, he was like, fuck, you know, I have to be aware of the consequence of my actions. And when I read that book, it really, I was in a lot of shit, and a lot of what people do is they react to situations and they cause more damage and all that based on their need to be seen or whatever and all that. But what I did was I took on board, deep in me, what is the consequence of this action? What is the effect, alright? And that's why I live all my life. But you imagine if most people are just trying to find their way, they can't even perceive, and then they just do things and then there's reaction. They don't actually have the energy in their body to actually perceive the consequence. You know, you can see all the adjustment bureau outcomes and stuff like that, and you just, what I do is I feel the right one and I go with it. I just do that automatically in my pattern recognition of all the variables at play. But it initially, to actually integrate that change of, say, the consequence of your actions, it requires a huge investment up front, alright? Most people don't have the energy to actually change, so they're reacting. And a lot of people in the alternate research community and spiritual people and stuff, they're seeing people and they see their potential, but they don't understand why. When you understand life force content, you can tune in, you can see their body and stuff like that, and they might be not healthy in that. Say in poverty, which sort of I've experienced, it's not as bad as, say, the American one where you get food stamps and stuff, but it's a bit like being on a reservation, alright? The foods that were given to the Native Americans and stuff when they were taken from their land, they didn't have the nutritional input to actually function on the higher level. So there was a subtle, deliberate effort to suppress that, which is ongoing now. If you think the stuff that, my mind, it's designed to cut us off from the multidimensional, right? If you allow it. Nothing has control over you unless you empower it, a bit like the negative placebo and stuff, which the whole society runs on, right? So what I'm wanting to do is talk about pattern recognition, okay? And one method I found was through nutritional teaching of the amazing person by the name of Dr. Weston Price. And it's amazing, I call him like the Nikola Tesla of nutrition, because society has forgotten about him on a fundamental level. He's out there, not hidden, but it's not hugely promoted and stuff, but I feel he's going to come back. If not, he has been coming back, and I did include some clips in my Conscious Explorer part 13 and 14, I think, about the human body, potential and all that sort of stuff. And so what I learnt through Dr. Weston Price, okay, was the lesson I learnt, alright, and I'll get to why I learnt that lesson, is the menu's unique, the outcome's common, alright? So Dr. Weston A. Price, just had a bit of an interruption again, sorry about that. I called my relationship to what I found out about things like Nikola Tesla, I called to myself Dr. Weston A. Price, the Nikola Tesla of nutrition. He's a bit like Indiana Jones as well, which is amazing. And I won't get into the whole nutrition thing because that's a whole big topic. But say in the early 1900s, he was living in America, and as a dentist, he could not find pretty much very few people in the Western culture at the time. I think he was living in Ohio. I haven't researched him for a while, but menu unique, outcome common. And that's what I'm getting to, the point of that pattern recognition component, alright? Because when you know the outcome, you can reverse engineer a lot before it. So if you know the purpose, say, is control, you can see the methods all the way through it, alright? So he was a dentist, and he couldn't find anyone with straight, healthy teeth, and what he reverse engineered health. The study of teeth had a huge effect on your health. So 1910, 1920, he was a dentist. He saw a relationship between health of teeth and health of the human. So he wanted to find out a healthy segment of Western society, or a healthy society to actually measure health against, and he couldn't find that in the Western culture. What he did notice, and if you've ever looked at images and paintings and photos of, say, Native Americans or a lot of the indigenous, they've got this wonderful smile, incredible bone structure and stuff like that. So long story short, he started going between World War I and World War II, which was a poetic time, because technology was changing, and eventually a lot of the indigenous would be actually like their cultures would have been infused with Western culture. And what he found was the indigenous generation, like 2 or 3, 4 generations after white man had connected to the indigenous tribes, their health would erode, alright? So you could see the photos of like grandparents with beautiful teeth and stuff like that. The next generation, they weren't as tall, they weren't as healthy, and their teeth weren't as straight and stuff. And generations after that, they were impacted. And what he found is like things like coffee and flour and sugar and all that impacted their health. And a lot of the indigenous would lose their say historical sources of nutrition, such as off their land and their region. Right? So what he found in that era, the 1930s to 1940s, between World War I and II, because there were still some tribes that weren't touched by white men. So he would actually go on these like Indiana Jones adventures, going and making contact with these indigenous tribes that had not been touched. So he had to become a part of their culture and became integrated and like an honorary ambassador or, member of the tribe to actually understand their culture from a food perspective. It's really fascinating. He would uncover a common ingredient, all right, that all the tribes would have is their sacred food, all right. So what I'm saying, the menu unique, the outcome common. What he found through analysis and scientific research and stuff was, no matter where he went, all right, wherever the region, say the Eskimos in the ice or the Polynesians in tropical paradise, what he found is the analysis of their diet, they actually all had the same nutritional content in their food. So the Eskimos, they wouldn't have much vegetables and stuff, but they would ferment their vegetables in the ice. And the fermentation process actually created a lot of nutrition content, all right? He went to the Swiss Alps, and there were some regions of the Swiss Alps that were quite untouched in that era. And what he found is after the first grass after the winter thaw, the cows would eat this special like nutrient-rich grass, and that first butter that they created from the cows, because the cows would ingest and go through all their stomachs and ferment, and that's the butter that would be created from that grass fed after the first thaw was their sacred food, right? And the Polynesians, and I'm getting to the point quick, the men, okay, the men of the tribe, like hunters, when a couple married, the hunters would go out into the ocean and catch shark, right? And what they would try and get is the eggs of the female shark, and that was regarded as sacred food, and they would give it to the women, okay? And why the women? Because the women were going to have children, so they would get them nutritionally abundant to actually gestate the children, to actually form the perfect bone structure and stuff. Because not only is it teeth and stuff, but you think about the third eye and the glands in the brain. If they got the adequate nutrition, then they become very gifted intuitively. And my attitude is, the Western society is like a C+ on perception. Other tribes, they Iranians and many other cultures around the world actually have fundamentally in their culture perception. We think we're the most advanced, but we're just an average, a low. I'll give us a C+, all right, on average, because it's not the individual's fault, it's the culture and the society and the food and all that sort of stuff, all right. Sorry, more interruptions. So yeah, I don't blame the individuals in our culture, right? There's a lot of infrastructure behind what we're told, alright? Like the chorus of our society is very loud, in unison. You as the individual to go against that takes a lot of energy, okay? But, so yeah, I was talking about Dr. Weston Price and the pattern I learned from him. And it's about nutrition, but it doesn't have to apply to that, right? The pattern being, he went to all these cultures around the world. It's fascinating. He learnt all their foods, investigated what they consumed and stuff like that, because he was trying to understand how they had amazing health. They looked stunning, because they had to be in health, and they had to be in the highest quality. Plus, all these cultures had, shamans and psychics was a part of their culture. You go to the Aboriginals, they connect to their ancestors and the song lines through the earth and stuff like that. All right. So he When each of these tribes learnt what they consumed, he took samples and stuff back and went and did analysis in that era, the early 1900s, early part of the 20th century, which is quite, vastly different to our technology. And he went to all these different regions, and the outcome of their diet and their menu was health, okay? Let alone their perceptions, which, our society doesn't focus on. It's about the 3D sort of 5 sense reality that we all are maintained in, right? So what he found, why their obviously wisdom over countless years and generations and stuff, is all these societies, all these indigenous cultures actually had like a sacred food, such as I said about the eggs of the shark of the Polynesians. And when he did analysis of them, he found the butter, the first production of butter after the thaw of the snow in the Swiss Alps, and the breads that they made was sacred and stuff. What he found was a common ingredient, which he called activator X, which in 1943 they'd eventually reverse engineer, and in 1943 I know vitamin K2 became the Nobel Prize for medicine for the research in nutrition, and that's what he worked out. He could identify, but they didn't have the science to actually tell the chemical makeup of that component. So vitamin K2, right, which is amazing, which I use myself. I found out, combination with high levels of vitamin D3, it will release 2 enzymes that vitamin K2 in your body will activate, because when high levels of vitamin D3 are consumed, these 2 enzymes are in an inactive state, but vitamin K2 activates them. And what the 2 enzymes do, it takes calcium from where it's not meant to be and puts it where it's meant to be. So heart disease called atherosclerosis is the calcification of the heart arteries and stuff like that, and science says it's all cholesterol, which I'm not making any recommendations, but I had a grandfather that was on statins as a guinea pig in the 1980s, and he was a drooling mess, and the whole science from my perspective behind cholesterol is a redirection from this, because when you take calcium from where it's not meant to be, where it's meant to be, such as the bones, when we talk about cellular memory, all right, Andrew talks about that. When you look at a computer hard disk, not the solid state ones now, but the spinning spindles, ones of perhaps technology that's a bit out of date now, on the platters is a crystal. It's all crystal, and they're given a charge of 0 or 1, and that's how data is formed, all right? So when you use that analogy for the bones are calcium crystal, all right? So we store our data in our crystal, and the key is how do you access it, all right? That's the state you're in, like hypnosis and all that. So you can train your body, and that's what I said in the last video. I would actually sort of talk about that. But so Dr. Weston Price, vitamin K2, yeah. And so what I learned from him in that research is a pattern recognition component, what I call the many unique outcome common, all right? So it's a pattern recognition variable to employ, overlaying with many other components to see the pattern of the reality. So while I associate with what I learnt from Dr. Weston Price, it is a component I use all the time, okay? So we look at COVID and what happened, and I haven't talked about a lot of this, and I've been contemplating whether to talk about it in an interview or a show or whatever, and I'll just say what I saw, okay? And I haven't talked about COVID and all that, and there's many things about it, right? And I'll just say this. I was doing healing training in October, and I got activations for that, and the Sunday, the second activation I got, the first one I saw hey buddy, like a time, like animation of the Incarnation War and all the wars and all the species that were trying to come here over time. maybe I'll learn computer animation. Hey, just had a bird interrupt me. Maybe I'll learn computer animation to actually draw that, because I saw a really cool way to express the incarnation more on the three Atlantises and three Lemurias and stuff. But on the Sunday, what I got was a perception of what COVID was, right? On one level. Because this is why I'm talking multidimensional method to the 3D madness, right? If you can accept that level of things, and you can see what trickles down into the 3D, because say healing and stuff takes a while. And yeah, what I saw from the social distancing component, okay, was, and I see like whether or not you believe there's a virus or whatever, that's up to you. The outcome of it and what's being done, and I've interacted with clients that have had COVID and stuff like that, and I've seen people in my Facebook feed post that they've had these weird things and didn't know what was going on, and then COVID comes and gets clarity, and it's like, oh, that's exactly what I had. It makes sense. So I see, whether it was created or whatever, like as Andrew said, it's Earth has to give life here a blessing. So if there's a virus, it's a form of life form, all right? So what is the purpose of that? So if Earth gives it a blessing, so the outcome is a virus, all right? So what I saw about the social distancing component is, like you and me, you know, if you're here, you've probably done a lot of exploration into healing and the concepts of energy and energy hygiene and all those sort of things, okay? And healing and being willing to challenge the paradigm of, or the narrative of what we're being told and stuff like that. You have to accept that you're actually quite advanced to actually challenge the narrative and contemplate these sort of thoughts, all right? We're actually in the minority, vast minority, okay? So assumption is the mother of all fuck-ups. So if you assume other people know what you know, then, you know, the pattern recognition won't add up, because their reaction won't add up, right? So say, if we deal with the common person that has never explored any of the spiritual concepts such as energy, auras, boundaries and all that sort of stuff, right? They got no awareness that they can affect someone else. So what I saw is that the social distancing, and I'm just going to use the metaphor of like a 15-part module of multidimensional life, right? That we haven't accepted yet, okay? But say from the fundamentals, and I did the show in 2018 with Andrew about the solar system update, where he said that Earth had gone through the galactic central plane and we're in a new frequency, and we're heading to a 64,000 year of golden age energy, all right? And we're in a different location of the galaxy and all that, so the frequencies are a lot higher, okay? So there's this underlying boiling of the pot perception and energy, dimensionally wise, what's going on. But the narrative is keeping people in the placebo belief sort of thing of, this is all we live in, like 3D 5 cents, right? So if this bubbling is happening, then there's going to be events to shift our perspective, right? So what I saw about the social distancing in that 15 module course of multidimensional living was module 1.1, okay? And so if an individual's never had the concept of a boundary before, or an energetic consequence, or projection, or all those sort of things, okay? If they've never had that, how do you teach them, okay? So the concept of social distancing was trickled through our society, but you need to have 6 feet, 1.5 meters apart and stuff like that. So what that does to people is make them actually consider, I have to be this far away from people, okay? I have to make sure I am not in their space, okay? So when I went back and I said most people were running on 30 or 40% of the life force, okay? You sure the issues that just that simple thing brought into people, they couldn't handle it. It puts them over the edge. They were just, you know, crazy, you know, and who wants to have to implement that in their life? Who wants to have to in everything you do, have to consider a variable newly added on. I've got to stand this far away from people and I can't be in their field and all that sort of stuff, right? But you see that from a multi-dimensional perspective of we're going to another level, alright? If people have that as a fundamental, alright, I've got it, my space, my presence can affect people. You think about energy and boundaries and psychic projections and all that sort of stuff, alright? It actually offers people the teaching on boundaries, okay? So it's not pleasant and all that, but you go in, you empathize into their life and what they're aware of, and it's a big new concept for the majority of people, okay? We take it for granted. We know we affect people, we know people affect us, and energy issues and energy like hygiene and all those sort of things, but to see it from a multidimensional preparation and training of people, it was a very good teaching on that, right? So a lot of people that didn't know before now have a concept of spacing and boundaries, and they can affect people, alright? So another thing with the virus, all the airlines shut down, alright? At the moment, as Australians, we pretty much can't go anywhere in the world, alright? So there were 14,000 hugely expensive planes that were parked, right? All the A380s, 747s have been basically retired, okay? They no longer have a purpose, okay? So when those 20,000 planes and 14,000 were parked, just for a simple sake, 33%, like a third of the world's oil consumption was basically non-existent, right? So there was a lot of backlog and, you know, no need for production and stuff like that, right? So I think it was in Regions of the World, one of the part ones, the shows I made for Andrew, oil was talked about, alright? So what Andrew said oil is the cranial sacral fluid of the planet, alright? So as above, so below. We have cranial sacral fluid, and when we're deficient of that, our experience is influenced, particularly perceptions and stuff like that, alright? So when the oil wasn't consumed, there was a huge potential for increased frequency in the earth, right? She wasn't being spinal tapped. There wasn't war going on over the surface and stuff like that. So there was a bubbling up of energy potential, okay? So this was going many unique, outcome common, right? So one of the menus of control for Earth was consumption of oil, right? If you go through like the US oil consumption and the laws related to oil consumption in the engines, it didn't add up. There was huge, you know, inefficient engines, right? They were okay. The laws were very low on requirements of efficiency, which enabled a higher level of consumption. So most of us know in the world that the US consumes a lot of, like 40% of the world's energy and stuff like that, right? So one of the menu items for control, alright, was using oil to suppress the consciousness of the planet, alright? So you see that as a big overlying top-down, consistent across the planet, okay? So what happened when that overarching outcome of a menu item wasn't in effect, alright? What happens is the individual regions around the world that were reliant on the suppression of the overall oil were bubbling up, okay? So Andrew talks about there's 5,800 local realities, right? So different cities, different states, blah, blah, blah around the world. So each has its own energy management, alright? So when we see things like the US presidential election and all that, it creates a lot of division and polarity against each other and stuff like that, where the polarity is so extreme. There's violence and riots and all that sort of stuff, alright? So, and from my perspective, from the multi-dimensional level, you can see all these things potentially playing out, alright? So, as far as I'm concerned, there's always numerous programs running parallel alright, where they're ready to go at any time, alright? So you see all the different political movements, say, and I'm not in an attempt to be racist or anything, but the Black Lives Matter sort of thing has come up, alright? And I've said, you know, it's the soul level thing, it's not the skin suit. You know, it's crazy that we have issues with based on the skin suit that people wear. We don't tune into their potential and their abilities and their soul level of things, alright? Obviously, deliberately. Let's just get to it. And all these different sort of political movements that happen around the US, for instance. So say there was this thing against the police, alright? Defund the police, okay? So a lot of different cities in America and stuff, they played into that program, alright? And so what happens, say if a region's really bubbling up, alright, one weapon to that in the region is criminality, okay? So if you take away the police and you have all these riots and stuff and you limit what the police can do to counteract that, you're actually empowering that distortion over that region, okay? So, and then as a byproduct, alright, crime goes up. So crime is a very negative frequency that lowers the region, okay? You can have, so that was just a pattern that I saw, okay? So, yeah, it's very interesting. When you observe and you don't get polarized by the emotional purpose of it, which is trying to trigger you, right, and milk you, you can start seeing the reality how it works. Okay. Sorry, I just had another break. So you can see sort of a top level pattern that's going on, right? Where, so there's these options that are ready to go and all they do is power energy into them. Give media support, you know, the players in the political region that are part of the incarnation level of things, they support it, alright? So the key is not to get polarized by this stuff. The key is to observe and realize that some of these patterns that are going on are definitely tapping in to the collective on some level, you know, with the fundamentals of, say, the economy uncertainty and the virus uncertainty. It's going to raise a lot of insecurities in people, alright? Service to self will kick in and all that, you know. People think that when things go bad, the best in people come out, but the actual worst. Self-serving, bats off a sinking ship sort of concept, alright? We've seen that, you know. The interesting thing, like the toilet paper sort of issue and with the virus and all that, which I'm going to say is fucking, I loved, alright? Because what I realized about the virus is turning everything on its head, okay? And what better way to example that is the thing that you literally wipe your ass with and clean it, you have no value with, alright, became the most precious thing, okay? And that's another sort of shift that was imposed is the wrong word, that trickled down and people sort of caught on to, and it was, you know, encouraged, and there's a lot of ridicule about those people that are doing that, but you saw all the shops empty, like people were serving themselves, you know, there was no unity. As soon as it falls apart, the worst comes out, right? So that you have to see that the encouragement of the erosion of government and stuff like that, it wants that to come out, right? Because it's like man against man, you know, self-service and stuff like that. There was some other things I want to talk about, but they've slipped my mind at the moment. So with the Western price concept, the menu unique, the outcome common, if you see how those individual regions, based on the lack of oil consumption, affected everything, made the potential bubble up, right? A unique menu for each region was required, a bit like the nutrition of the indigenous that Dr. Weston Price found out, alright? So all I'm trying to do is encourage you to see things from a different perspective. If you know the outcome is control, alright? reverse engineer the region of what the efforts are, control and stuff like that. So there's the individual regions of criminality and stuff, which is, drugs might be employed and stuff like that to also diminish it, which is interesting. There's a big drug, like make it legal sort of thing going on in the US and stuff, and probably elsewhere in the world. All right, so you see the outcome for most people is hardship. All right, they're not happy, they're disappointed and stuff. So instead of harnessing that emotional state and using it as motivation and passion, all right, to engage your genius, because what happens in traumatic situations, a lot of the best can come out in people and stuff like that. Maybe see the decriminalization, I'll get it out in a sec, of the drugs, to make that a blow-off valve outlet for people to go back to suppression, all right? Because they're unhappy about life and there's not much prosperity and all that sort of stuff, okay? So it's sort of encouraged to go that path, all right? So what's there? Maybe entities that are harvesting and all that sort of stuff. People are traumatic, they have breakdowns, create more distortion in the reality. Because I remember many years ago I spoke to Douglas Dietrich, and I called in and I said I saw the nature of sort of the cocaine sort of thing that influenced the LA region in the 1980s and stuff, was to lower the frequency of that region, because drugs are used that way. You don't even know what imprinted on the drugs, like the narcos cartels and stuff that got their symbol, and all the karma that they do, all the death and destruction is imprinted on these drugs, all right? So they're haunted, potentially, all right? If a lot of people are going into a position of lack and trauma and unhappiness into that outlet, it's conducive to influence, all right? So just see that as a pattern. And so what I've said is, say, the oil not being consumed as much, so the energy is bubbling up, the regional control is going on, and so worldwide now, all right, there was a setup for failure in many regions like the US, the UK and stuff, where they allowed international travel. They still have. I don't know if it's finished. I'm pretty sure it has been closed, but for most of 2020 it was wide open. All right? Now they're in, huge virus issues, lockdowns, and all that sort of stuff. All right. So that's a setup for failure as well. All right. So what I've said is the fundamentals bubbling up. The petrol consumption to lock it down has been taken away. So there's regional controls. So what's a new program that's being interacted at the overall level? All right, things done into us, controlling our bodies and stuff like that. And I don't want to get into that because it's a very controversial topic to even talk about. But and a lot of placebo energy, I feel, is being put into that on the negative side, right? We can create the negative placebo because we believe all the stuff talked about. And potentially a lot of the negative information that's being talked about them is being seeded in deliberately to trigger people, their fear and resistance and all that sort of stuff. Where my attitude is, this skin suit I'm in, I've got the absolute contract with it. Nothing can affect it unless I sort of give it permission to. And when you sort of do the healing and the nutrition and stuff, the technology of the body is absolutely incredible. All right. So like I said earlier on, the energy suppression, keeping people at a low level. So illnesses and disease are a potential byproduct, but it takes away from the intuitive genius of our technologies that is always there. And you've got to see how much energy is invested to suppress that, all right? Where the natural byproduct is perception, all right? So, yeah, and a lot of people, they don't realize they have it. Like, you perceive what you think you perceive, like in blinkers, but what others sort of get seems so idiocracy. They don't seem to be able to get what seems obvious to you, but that's a sign that your perceptions are going off the charts, right? You just feel the same, but everything else feels slower and stuff like that. That's a sign that your perceptions are increasing, right? So that's where you've got to accept, wow, I'm actually perceiving this pretty well. Shouldn't look for outlets like validation and stuff like that. One of the key things I feel that most people need to do is develop their intuitive muscles, right? So pattern recognition is a really good skill. And like I said earlier on, don't fear failure. You know, sometimes, for instance, when I was interacting with Andrew, I'd deliberately ask the wrong question to get the right answer. There was nothing wrong, all right? Just if you can recalibrate with the new information, okay? So this is quite long already, and I might build on this in the future. So this has been going on quite long. Just realize if you've been a thorough researcher over a long period of time, you've actually got that data as reference in your cellular memory, okay? Take on board sort of what I'm saying, the new unique outcome common. That's where you reverse engineer stuff. So if you know the outcome, say control, limitation, and keeping humanity in a very narrow consciousness bandwidth, things might be done to limit that, because what happens if you can perceive, like what happens to me if I read news articles and stuff like that, I can tune into the frequency of what it's trying to create for people and their perception. You can tune into the intent of things and stuff like that, and you know it, but you can take away the data points, like the wisdom nuggets, alright, that are the most that you can integrate and accept, because the things to actually have an influence, they have to have a lot of truths in it, alright? That's why I like things like Netflix. I love watching, because them to have success, there's trickling down of the truths that the creative authors are tuning into that resonate with a lot of people, right? Like Star Wars and stuff like that. So if you've just found me or whatever, thank you for finding me. The people that have sought me out for sessions, Infinite Potential Healing, thank you for that, and I hope you're benefiting from this. The multidimensional method to the 3D madness, I hope these concepts, you take what you need away. Obviously what I'm going to be speaking is multi-layered and stuff like that, so perhaps revisit that in the future. What I used to do is I would study a teaching and stuff like that, and I'd revisit it 6 months later or whatever. While I do that, I actually want to bring up a bit more about the virus, now that I trigger myself because I've had these breaks. What I did when I had my awakening and triggering, I went into this thing I call download phase, because I lost money, say, in the stock exchange, and this thing called the Federal Reserve was having a lot of influence, and I had no idea what it was, and I realized ignorance, there's no excuse for ignorance, right? We can control our level of awareness. So I went and researched a lot of people, such as David Icke, and his lecture, Turning of the Tide, I loved, right? From the mid-90s. And if you watch that, it's very interesting if you can still access it. I don't know if you can, I haven't looked at it for a while. But he talked a lot of things about microchipping and all those sort of things, right? Cashless society and all that, blah, blah, blah. So what I found with the virus, and this is a multidimensional method to the madness, right? So the virus is here. That was 1995 when he was talking about that. What I realized on a multidimensional level, and this is a metaphor of what happens when you heal and you commit to the healing and stuff, is things can move back through time, right? From our 3D level awareness, but from the multidimensional, it's just all happening at the same time. So what I felt, a lot of these conspiracy teachers and stuff, they were tuning in, say, the post-world after the coronavirus, right? So say, and I'm not debating on whether it's right or wrong or something like that, but say if there was a pandemic and money was changed between hands, there's a potential to be a risk. So there's a logic for not having cash, right? I like cash, money and all that, not being observed and all that. But there's a logic in the world post a pandemic, okay? So what I felt was a lot of these teachers that have been seated, all right, on the awareness level have actually probably been tuning into things. But when they talk about it, it doesn't make sense. But when things transpire, it makes sense, all right? And I'm not agreeing about the control or anything like that. I'm just giving you this as a variable, okay? So when you're in hindsight review, you review those sort of teachings, it's fascinating because the world shifts, all right? Changes happen, change is constant, all right? Nothing ever stays the same in the 3D reality because there's purpose to experience on the soul level on Earth no matter what's going on, okay? So that's one other thing that I saw and I felt from the pattern recognition. A lot of these teachers are talking about things relative to their time, but after the events transpire and stuff, there's a logic to it. And I'm not agreeing to it or whatever, I'm just saying there's a pattern, okay? And there's something I just remembered but I forgot. Yeah, I hope you get something from this. It's going close to an hour or whatever, and I'll try and do those sort of length sort of recordings. There's probably things I've forgotten and I'll remember after, like the last video. But yeah, I think it's a very powerful time, okay? Oh, this is what I was going to say. TV shows. The way I see sort of Earth at the moment, it's a metaphoric of the TV show Westworld, okay? And if you step back and do the multidimensional view and observe, say, I haven't seen the rest of the seasons, but the first season of Westworld, where Westworld is a adventure park for the exclusive and rich and stuff like that. And what a lot of them do is they become basically mass murderers and rapists and psychopaths, and the Westworld allowed them to be their truth. There was all these robots and stuff like that, and a lot of them were just disgusting people, but that was revealing their subconscious to their truth, okay? And they were good people as well that hated that, and there's many good stories in that. But why I'm saying this is the way I'm sort of stepping back and observing Earth and what's going on here is it's a metaphor of Westworld. And there's bankers, there's politicians, there's activists, there's sport athletes, there's movie stars and all this sort of thing. There's criminals and all that. It's very vast and diverse, the potential for soul experience here. So despite all the things going on, and why you think, some of these things I'm talking about might be scared or whatever and all that, my energy, I'm here an ally for all sides, because what I felt, despite this soul experience going on and all the control and all that, all sides are going to need us. They're going to hate us, but we're going to be the allies to also all sides at one point. And yeah, that's why I don't fear this. I'm just putting my frequency out, and I appreciate all the need of all the experiences, and I see the multidimensionals and their plays and all that sort of stuff, and the need for control. And one aspect of the need control is the absolute power, but they're also fear of the repercussions, like the way we'll act and stuff. And I have my own perception of, so if I've got my agenda and all that sort of stuff, resolution and all that, but I'm appreciating all the variables going on, okay? So I encourage you to do the same. Step back, observe your polarity and stuff. Engage pattern recognition skills, because it's called perception, manifestation and ignition. I say perception ignition because there's a point where you might be training wheels and relying on other people, but then it sparks and you realize, oh shit, I might actually be perceiving more than the others, and what I've got is different than others and stuff like that. So I think from a perception level there's enormous amount of potential for people to step up and realize that maybe forces Earth and all that are trying to work with a lot of people and they don't realize it. I haven't accepted their level of consciousness Tetris where they're at. And we need to be and engage our eldership and accept our responsibility of the awareness we have and stuff. And that's why I'm just sharing the components I know and I've learnt in order to accelerate that potential development in anyone that comes across my stuff. So I'll end it here. Thank you for watching. I hope you've gained something out of it. Hang in there. My attitude, it's an endurance game, so play the long term. Just realize you have a space no matter what's going on. You can control your body. You're the owner of the contract with it. And let's see what happens, guys. See you next time. Thank you.